Autophiles, welcome to your A to Z guide to all the Chinese car brands and sub-brands that are available in Malaysia for now, in 2024. 2025 is going to be a longer list, so we might as well get it out of the way right now. Starting with A for Aion. Aion is an offshoot of JAC, and yes, it is pronounced Aion, so that A is there for no other reason than to come on top of the list. Aion is relatively new, but the parent company is very old, older than Malaysia in fact. And Aion and JAC are both linked to Tan Chong through Tan Chong's subsidiary, which is called WTCA, Warisan Tan Chong Automotive. Before we get into JAC, we'll talk about Aion. Aion has two vehicles, the Y Plus, which we reviewed somewhere, I'll put it here, and they've also got the ES, which is a sedan, which was only recently launched a couple of weeks ago. Aion's philosophy seems to be to target a more mature, kind of taxi-like market. So the Aion Y Plus, a lot of people say that they see it in Shanghai and in Guangzhou as a taxi. The ES is a four-door sedan, which comes across as a little bit of a old-school converted vehicle from ICE. But I don't know, I haven't driven the car. Pricing is very, very aggressive. It's actually the cheapest electric vehicle sedan that you can buy in Malaysia today. Very recently launched, that's why you haven't heard of it, but it exists. Next is B for BAIC. You thought I was going to say BYD, but BAIC comes first in the alphabetical order. And BAIC actually hasn't been launched in Malaysia yet, but they've previewed a couple of cars and we have test driven one of their cars, the X55. And the X55 actually competes against the Proton X70, or at least it's supposed to, it hasn't launched yet. They've also got a BJ car. The BJ car is supposed to be like a Land Cruiser alternative, a Jeep alternative. Yeah, that's the space that they're going for. We don't know what their pricing is going to be like, but they're going to partner up with EPMB to do local assembly. Anyway, I think it's a next year brand, BAIC. B is also for Borgward, and Borgward was actually sold in Malaysia. This is an old German company that is dead, and in fact it's been dead twice, died twice? I don't know. So the first time was very, very long time ago, before my time, probably before your time also, looking at the viewership demographics. The Borgward brand was brought back to life after decades of being dead, and they partnered up with a Chinese partner and tried to get things going. They actually did have a few models. Like I said, it was sold here under Go Auto, which used to also sell another Chinese brand. We'll get into that later. So Go Auto was selling these Borgward cars, and the company went bankrupt, I think during COVID or around that time. Died twice. I doubt it'll be resuscitated again. Anyway, moving on. So B is also for BYD, and BYD is actually a pretty young brand. 1995 they were set up, but they only got very rapid growth in 2020 to 2023. Just came out of nowhere, and now it's the best-selling electric vehicle brand in Malaysia, and I think the Atto 3 is the best-selling EV in Malaysia. And it's the only electric vehicle brand that is consistently neck and neck with Tesla, sometimes outselling. They are very vertically integrated, so they build their own batteries, they build their own dreams, some would say. They're quite ambitious and they're quite big. In Malaysia, they're being distributed by Sime Darby, or should I just say Sime, since they rebranded. What's weird also to note in Malaysia is that BYD is the only brand that has been allowed to sell through a showroom that is not owned by a local company. There is a BYD showroom that is owned by a Chinese company called Harmony Auto. I think there's only one outlet. They sell a few cars. The first was the Atto 3, very mid-car by 2024, 2025 standards, but it was one of the first major EVs to be sold here, and it is the best-selling EV in Malaysia, so safe bet. Just nothing that special. Second car they launched was the Dolphin, a hatchback, pretty small. I haven't driven it, but I've gone and touched and felt it. It's like the cheapest that you can get in Malaysia, because there's an artificial 100,000 ringgit barrier, right? So BYD Dolphin is the entry-level hatchback, and then you've also got the BYD Seal, which is the up there product. Finds the 3 Series and C-Class in terms of ambition, and it's all electric and it's super fast. And of course, they've also got the they've also got the BYD M6, and they've got the BYD Sea Lion. Now, the M6 and the Sea Lion were both launched very late this year. Sea Lion 7, I should say, that's the full name. Sea Lion 7 is essentially a Seal SUV, but a little bit different. The features are different, the spec is a little bit different, and the pricing is a lot higher. Okay, we're done with B. Next is C for Chery. Chery is a brand that is very close to my heart, because the first test car I ever took was a Chery. It was a Chery Maxim. I think Chery is a very interesting company, because unlike BYD, which is privately owned, Chery is actually state-owned or state-affiliated. They are based in Wuhu, which is, I think, the Anhui province. Very interesting car brand. They're very hungry. I think for years they've been the #1 exporter of vehicles, and what they do is they go to developing nations. So what they do is they come into these markets and they show what they can offer for a much lower price, how much more you're getting, and they get customers there, they get market share there. So they're pretty big in Latin America. The biggest market that they dominate is Russia. because after the war in Ukraine, all the Western powers were forced to close their local operations there. And so once all of those legacy companies left Russia, what was left? All the Chinese companies, and Chery became, I think, number 2, right behind Lada. So the thing about Chery is they've got a few sub-brands, and the way they are treating the sub-brands is quite interesting, and I'll explain more later on in this list about the sub-brands that are available in Malaysia. So what you need to know is that Chery in Malaysia, the one that was here before was run by a different structure, a different company altogether. They've got their own plant in Shah Alam for CKD operations. On top of that, the strategy that they're adopting now is to mirror whatever Proton seems to be doing. They will offer something at around the same price. Never has any non-national brand been allowed to compete so closely with Proton. For example, the Omoda 5 goes up against the X50, and I think it's within 5% of the flagship pricing. Same thing with the Tigo 8 Pro and the Proton X90. They're both around 5% price difference, and of course once you factor in the discounts, might be even smaller. And on top of that, the Tigo 7 Pro, which is the X70 competitor, actually came in, I think, exactly the same price, or maybe even cheaper. I can't remember exactly, but again, unprecedented pricing strategy. Someone in government is allowing this to happen. You can be sure about that. The only car that is outside of the scope of this strategy is the electric Omoda, the Omoda 5, E5, that's what it's called. So interesting company to take note of, but there's also the other brands to talk about. And we move on to D. D is for Dongfeng. Dongfeng is another state-owned company, and it's very old, like GAC, many decades old. Chery, on the other hand, is only, I think, maybe 2 decades old, 1997, but Dongfeng has been around a long time. And they're from a little province that I've never heard of before. I don't think anyone here has heard of before. It's called Wuhan. Sounds familiar. Anyway, Dongfeng has pretty tight collaborations with foreign partners like Nissan and Honda. So in Malaysia, Dongfeng is represented by Perkema. Perkema is the Bumiputra Trader Association for cars. So basically these are the guys who bring in cars using their APs and then sell them here as grey market cars. Love them or hate them, they exist. So it's an interesting setup, right? Because they usually survive on their alpha revenue, but they realize Chinese cars, Chinese electric cars are coming. We need to take advantage of the situation. There's a tax break that's going on for everyone. And so what they did is they went to China and they looked at a number of brands who are still not in yet, and they decided to go for Dongfeng. And they said it's because Dongfeng had some ambition, but they also made sure the pricing was very well controlled. So the car they brought in was the Dongfeng Box, which is something like a BYD Dolphin competitor. It's a hatchback. Inside looks pretty nice for the price, but at the same time the range is a little bit low. The power output is not very impressive. So if it's something like a second car, third car, the Pasar Malam car, or something to go around in town with, that you come home and you charge, that kind of thing, I think Dongfeng Box is pretty interesting, but we'll have to stay tuned for their 2025 strategy. Next, G is for GAC. Now, we mentioned GAC earlier with Aion. GAC is again partnered up with WLTP? No, they're partnered up with WTC, and they started off selling the GS3, which is another X50 competitor, but the first GAC GS3 that they brought in, I think during the COVID time, was a very meh product. It was something like the old Haval, what was it called? M1 or Haval H1. That little product which had no real ambitions, had a very rough setup, and the only thing was let's just sell it cheap and see how it goes. So the first GS3 was just one of those meh crossovers. I think they just sold it to their Mayflower rental division, and that was it lah. The new GS3, called the GS3 M Zoom, has a lot more ambition, and it really goes up against the X50 in terms of packaging. I think in pricing it's maybe not as aggressive, but in terms of packaging it really is. Power output is, I think, the highest in segment. It looks eye-catching. It's got an actual real exhaust flap that opens up in sports mode and gives you a different sound. So I want to see what else GAC can do, but yeah, for now it's just the GS3. But it's interesting because Tanchong's bread and butter, which is Nissan, in Malaysia, Nissan and Tanchong have been linked for decades, right? But now Nissan is going through some stuff. Tanchong read the room and realized, okay, I gotta find some other partner to reliably bring in products that are at least competitive and fresh. So GAC might be that lifeboat for Tanchong going forward. But we'll see. Maybe Nissan will pull it together.
I have high doubts about this.
Next is GWM, Great Wall Motor. So GWM was actually here before under Go Auto. That time I think it was just called Haval, and then there was a transition. Go Auto is actually linked to NASA somehow. I think it's one of the relatives that runs that, and they currently distribute Neta, but that's a different story. So when Great Wall Moto, GWM, was selling the Haval, H1 and H2, it was under a different distributorship, and apparently there were a lot of problems. But now GWM Malaysia is here to kind of take over all the dealerships and re-strategize and come up with a CKD and a product plan that is more solid. And actually they've got a lot of delays because they were still tied up with Go Auto for a short while when they came in. But they've since managed to let go of that partnership and find some other partner to work with. They've also got a CKD operations now finally set up with EPMB. They already started manufacturing their Haval H6 HEV. And actually GWM also launched the Aura line of electric vehicles and Tank, which we'll talk about later. But first we got to talk about H, and H is for Haval. And Haval is quite interesting because they actually have a history in Malaysia. Like I mentioned before, they were the brand being sold in Malaysia with Go Auto, so they had the H1 and H2. I think the H1 was called the M1 before that, or M4 or something like that. Nothing that special. But now you've got the H6 HEV, and that's quite special because it's a high-powered turbo and a high-powered hybrid electric motor combined in a product that looks competitive. What they're doing is they're offering you a very, very high-tech, high-powered product with enough equipment. At the same time, the pricing is 140,000 ringgit. It's a very good value for money product. But we shall see if Malaysians are convinced by this H6 HEV. J is for JAC, and JAC is a commercial vehicle company actually. They have some passenger vehicles in China, but for Malaysia, they're going to concentrate on commercial vehicles. Why? So the guy who runs the company in Malaysia realized that, well, in the EV space for passenger cars, there's just so many options. The competition is so high. So to be another Chinese car company trying to fight that space is kind of silly. The demand is really not there for so many players. And on the commercial vehicle side of things, the demand is there because a lot of multinational companies have a quota for buying EVs. They have to have some electric vans, electric pickup trucks in their fleet so that they can offset for carbon credits and all that stuff. So that's what JAC is doing. They've got a couple of interesting products, notably the T9 pickup truck and the T8 pickup truck. So the T8 pickup truck is kind of meh, but it is aimed at those companies that just need an electric pickup truck just to fill up some quota and get some carbon credits. The T9 is a bit more ambitious because it's one pickup truck platform that can do EV, diesel, range extender, and I think plug-in hybrid or hybrid. So they've got a lot of different options. So you can imagine when now the diesel prices are through the roof, and next year the petrol prices going through the roof. Well, you've got these options for pickup truck powertrains, which none of the Japanese players are offering. So JAC T9, something to look into, and the pricing is very, very competitive, I would say. J is also for Jaecoo. Wow, Chinese companies like B and J. I wonder why. Anyway, Jaecoo. Going from commercial vehicles from JAC to Jaecoo, we have luxury vehicles. Jaecoo, I was there for the launch of the Jaecoo brand in China, and when they launched it, it was supposed to be a concept called O&J, like orange juice, right? But O&J would be like these two cool, youthful brands targeting what was called the LOHAS, the modern LOHAS, lifestyle-oriented, high aspiration something. Wow. These are people who are willing to try new things as long as the price is right and the package is convincing, and that is exactly what Jaecoo is going after. So Omoda was supposed to go after a more futuristic Lexus inspired look, whereas Jaecoo is going after a more rugged Land Rover inspired look. They both are essentially reskinned versions of Chery's existing products in China, some from the other brands like Exceed and all that. So yeah, Jaecoo products are very, very lifestyle oriented. They're very premium flavored. And the theory is this: okay, Jaecoo J7, let's say 150,000 ringgit, right? What's the competitor product from a European brand that is established? Let's say a Land Rover Evoque. That thing is a $450,000 product, and I think it's a little bit smaller than the J7. So customers can get the look, can get a taste of the feel, right? And it's a respectable looking car. And the depreciation of an Evoque is the price of the entire product that they're selling, Jaecoo J7. So I can see why people are convinced. J is also for Jetour. Now I think it's pronounced Jetour. It could be Jetour, but yeah, it's another one of those Chery subsidiaries. So Jetour actually came in by themselves during the Malaysia Auto Show. They showed a bunch of products, also lifestyle oriented, also kind of premium aspiration. But I looked at all the products, I looked at the offerings, I couldn't really get a feel for what they were going after, and they haven't actually launched yet. Like, there's no product you can go out there and buy. I don't even think there are showrooms out yet, so it's more of a BAIC kind of situation. Check back next year for the 2025 A to Z list. J is also for JMC. I'm telling you, they love B, they love J. JMC is represented in Malaysia by another one of Tan Chong's subsidiaries. I didn't know Tan Chong had this many subsidiaries, but they do. This subsidiary is called Angkatan. Hey, wordplay. From my understanding, it's also mostly commercial vehicles like JAC, but they do have one pickup truck. It's called the Vigus Pro. I have not driven this car. I just sat in it, and it's a shit box. But it is also filling a niche in the market. If you really need a cheap pickup truck, they have one. L is for Leapmotor. So Leapmotor is quite interesting. A lot of the brands that are on here are either state affiliated or they are new brands that are affiliated with state affiliated brands. But Leapmotor is one of those brands that is kind of new. So Leapmotor is only 10 years old or possibly younger than that. And they had some promising tech because when you're a young company like that, you can do things that are very different. So your vehicle architecture can be a lot more advanced in places. What's interesting about Leapmotor is that they are affiliated with Stellantis. So Stellantis is that big Western conglomerate. So they've got Italian, French, American brands all under one roof. They're using their Stellantis dealer network to distribute Leapmotor products outside of China. The interesting thing is also that this collaboration only got formalized this year, and at the press conference, Malaysia was immediately named as the first place that it's going to be exported to in this region. And yeah, we've got the Leapmotor C10 at pretty aggressive pricing, I think 150 to 160 for a D segment size car. What was the only thing missing? Oh yes, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto were missing. They had some interesting features, like they don't even have a proper physical key. I think that's an accessory that you buy separately. So when you buy the car without that accessory, they just give you an NFC card that you can keep in your wallet, and you use that card to tap on the wing mirror, and that unlocks the car and then starts the car. Some people like that, some people find it a bit iffy. But yeah, Leapmotor is interesting. L is also for Lotus. Now, what is a British brand doing in a list of Chinese cars? Well, Lotus is now more Chinese than British, I would say. In some places, the money and the ownership is mostly Chinese. It was bought as part of the whole Proton Geely partnership. Since 2018 to now, Lotus has expanded, so it's mostly electric vehicles. They've got the Electre, large SUV, which goes up against the Lamborghini Urus. They've got the Emea, which is like a Porsche Taycan alternative, also all electric. And they've got the Emira, which is the one Lotus feeling product. And it's not electric, it's got the old Toyota Moto, I think, and they've got one more engine option, which is the Mercedes A45 engine that they've shoved in there. In Malaysia, they're represented by Sentinel Automotive, which is a relatively new player, but they've got experience in other brands as well. We'll talk about them later. They've also got another GD affiliated brand in Malaysia. Well, this list is long, huh? But we're at M. M is from Maxus. So Maxus is all about commercial vehicles, in Malaysia at least. And this brand is SAIC affiliated, so Shanghai's state-owned conglomerate. One of their sub-brands is Maxus, and Maxus, I think, is the one that bought over LDV, which is an old British van brand. In Malaysia, I think they've got two relevant products that I know of. We've actually tested one of them. It's the Maxus G10, which is like a Starex alternative with a 2-litre turbo petrol engine. They've also got an electric MPV. Actually, the first electric MPV to be launched in Malaysia was the Maxus MIFA 9. The weird thing about Maxus is that even though they are owned by SAIC, there is now SAIC Malaysia, which runs the MG sub-brand, which we'll talk about next. But SAIC Malaysia doesn't want to really form synergies with Maxus. Maxus is under Westa, which is another grey market importer who also deals with like helicopters, I think. So I think they are like, okay, you do your thing, we'll do our thing. That's the thing. So M is also for MG, another British brand that is now Chinese. The weird thing is that they entered the market in Malaysia with two electric vehicles. One was very interesting and the other one was, I can't understand why the other one was there. So the one that is interesting is the MG4, and it's interesting because the spread of variants was wider than anything I've ever seen. You know, they've got the basic model, the MG4 standard or whatever they call it, at like 104,000 ringgit. And they've got the MG4 X Power, so the top end variant. And the difference between these two is so huge. You know, you've got a much bigger battery pack, you've got all-wheel drive. The performance on the MG4 X Power is insane. And the pricing gap is also like, I think 50,000 difference between the base model and the top spec model. The other car that they launched, I think it was called the ES. Wow. I can't understand the ES. The ES is like an old platform, used to be petrol or something like that. And then they just plonked in an electric vehicle powertrain in there and called it a day. I looked at the pricing, I looked at the package, it just wasn't so convincing. Feels a bit like the Hyundai Kona to me, a bit of an in-between product, nothing that impressive. What's more impressive to me is that they are now stepping into different territory with two more products at the end of the year. The MG5, which is like a Vios city competitor. The other one is the MG Cyberster, which I can really understand why they're trying to do that. That's a Halo product. And it's for Neta. Neta is a pretty new company. The parent company is called Hozon. They've been around for I think 10 years or less. Also one of those companies where they're new, they're not affiliated to anyone, they just want to go in there and attack EVs head on. But I think the parent company is going through some trouble in China. I think they're restructured, so they're okay for now. But their focus is a little bit too much on the budget side of EVs. And when you focus too much on the budget side of EVs, when the price wars start at the higher end, then your stuff suffers. Because Neta V, a car that should be priced at like 50 to 60,000, they're selling it here for 100,000 because of the price floor that the government has set. I don't know why they bothered with this product. Neta X looks a bit interesting. But that car also should be priced a lot lower than it is. Neta is run by the people who used to run Haval, Go Auto. They also used to run Borgward. So I'm not going to say anything. O is for Omoda. As I mentioned before, Omoda, Jaecoo, supposed to be two lifestyle brands, sister companies launched at the same time. I don't think they're going to go so aggressive with Omoda in Malaysia. I think they're going to start to find a way to just park all the Omoda cars under Jaecoo, which they've already shown that they are willing to do. Yeah, the last car that Jaecoo launched was actually called the Jaecoo C9 by Omoda, which is actually a Exceed RX in China. So yeah, they're just like swapping around the badges at this point. And also, yeah, they've got the Omoda 5 parked under Chery, so I don't know what's going on. Omoda, sort your stuff out. O is also for Ora, and Ora is part of GWM. A lot of feline inspired electric vehicles, but maybe that's a niche that they thought was unexplored and they wanted to hit it hard. The feline inspired element, they're I think going to tone down a little bit. They first started with the Good Cat, which was the first Chinese electric vehicle to be launched in Malaysia. Then when the Lightning Cat was supposed to be launched here, they renamed it as 07. And there's one more Funky Cat or something like that, or Ballet Cat, that's the one that looks like a beetle. I think they're all going to be renamed to numbers because there was some copyright issue, like they can't copyright a name that has cat in it or something like that. Anyway, moving on. P is for Proton. Now all the fanboys are going to go crazy because I'm putting Proton under a Chinese car company list. I don't think Proton is a Chinese brand. I don't think they are. But it's undeniable that they are selling Chinese vehicles. X50, X70, X90, S70, even the Proton E-Mass 7. These are all Geely engineered products that Proton has put some input into, but you cannot deny that it is Chinese affiliated. Now when Proton was doing this with Mitsubishi, was Proton a Japanese car company? I don't think so. So Proton not really a Chinese brand, but it is a brand under the Geely umbrella, so I have to mention it. At the same time, to be fair, they are currently making 3 of the most Malaysian cars of all time: the Saga, the Iris, and the Persona. As far as I know, these models don't share any DNA with brands from other car companies from other countries. Of course, the gearboxes are all sourced from OEM suppliers, but the engines are Proton designs. Can you say the same for Peridot? So Proton is both a Chinese company and a Malaysian company. You can't deny both of them are half true. So they are on this list for that reason. And they're also the distributor for Smart, which is the next brand on the list. So S is for Smart. And the Smart brand started like 20-30 years ago as a competitor to Mini. Mercedes-Benz saw that BMW had purchased Mini and was going in a certain direction, and they wanted to start something with a brand from the ground up. And so they collaborated with Swatch, that watch company, and they created the Smart brand. From my understanding, they never made a cent. Around like 2018 or 2016, Geely started to buy a lot of Mercedes-Benz shares. They actually came to the table and sat down and said, okay, let's just collaborate on Smart. So Smart actually has a couple of products out, the hashtag 1 and hashtag 3. Both are in Malaysia. There's a hashtag 5 coming, I think, next year. And these products all sit on the SEA platform. This SEA platform is a platform that is shared amongst the Geely group brands. Volvo has an SEA product, Zeekr has an SEA product. And the other thing that's interesting to note about Smart is that, yes, they've got these 2 EVs, the hashtag 1 and hashtag 3. They're both going for the kind of Tesla market. Any EV that has a recognizable brand with European links, usually a bit expensive, right? But Smart is below 200,000 starting. Part of that whole deal is that you get 22 kilowatt AC charging, and that matters in an electric vehicle because 22 kilowatt AC charging versus, let's say, 7 kilowatt AC charging, that's the difference between charging your car 100% in 3 hours at home and charging your car 100% in like 15 hours at home. So it's a big difference. Another interesting thing to note is that they are represented by a Proton subsidiary called ProNet, which uses some dealerships that are Xpeng and Mercedes-Benz affiliated. So there's a lot of mouths to feed, and I think that's why the pricing is not as aggressive as it should be. Moving on, T is for Tank, another one of Great Wall Moto's many brands. Tank is interesting. It's like a Land Cruiser, Land Rover alternative. And what's also interesting is that they've got the most expensive Chinese vehicle on sale in Malaysia. Besides the Cyberster, I think Cyberster took over that mantle, but for a long time, the Tank 300 was actually the most expensive at 250,000 ringgit. I think the market is there because there's no Land Cruiser sold by UMW right now. The Land Rovers are pretty expensive, Defenders, Discoveries are all expensive. So China comes in with a 250,000 ringgit car that looks like it could be a substitute for that. The Tank 300 is selling, and they put it through its paces on some off-road courses and seems to be okay. Next is X is for Xpeng. And Xpeng is one of those newish brands, and it's very tech-centric. The founder is from a tech background. Xpeng actually reminds me a lot of Leapmotor, except that they have Apple CarPlay support. And in Malaysia, you have the G6, and Xpeng is being brought in by Burmaz. Burmaz are the distributors for Mazda and Kia, and they used to be the distributor for Peugeot for a short while after NASA gave it up during the pandemic. So yeah, the G6 was interesting. We actually test drove it. It has an aura about it, you know, and they had the guy who wrote the tree body problem consult on the design. So it has that very alien vibe to it, you know, very oppressive looking, very interesting car, very tech-centric. This was the first car that I experienced where I used my smartphone. I left my keys upstairs in my house. So I just walked to the car with my smartphone, opened the app, and yeah, the car, I could drive it out. That means I wasn't even in the car and it drove out of the parking lot. It was mind-blowing for me. Yeah, a lot of tech stuff in the Xpeng G6 were very, very interesting, and the fact that it's brought in by Burmaz should give a lot of Malaysians the confidence to go for this car as their first EV. I'm going to do a battery swap and continue with my list. Oh, battery swap technology, like Neo. Finally, Z is for Zeekr. Wow, I changed battery just for one brand. Zeekr is the final brand on this list, and they were actually the final brand to be launched in Malaysia. They were launched just in December of 2024, and this is another Geely affiliated company like Lotus and Proton and what was the other one? Volvo? I didn't put them on the list because I don't want to get perma-banned. So what can I say about Zeekr? Zeekr is being brought in by the same people who bring in Lotus vehicles, so I think maybe the Geely synergy there has been established. So what is Zeekr? Zeekr is actually not its own brand until it was spun off from Lynk & Co. Lynk & Co was another Geely experiment that didn't really take off. Zeekr is basically supposed to be an all-electric sub-brand with premium aspirations, but it's homegrown in China with some European styling input, but the assembly is all in China. Yeah, they also co-assemble the Volvo EX30 in the same plant as one of the Zeekr products, the Zeekr X. So they also share the same platform, you know, they both sit on that SEA platform that Smart is using. Yeah, that's the other brand, Smart. So yeah, Zeekr is very, very new, and they actually are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They kick things off very interestingly with the Zeekr X, which, as I mentioned, is that EX30 sibling. And they also launched the 009, which is like an Alphard competitor that, for the size and the spec and what they're throwing your way, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, so Zeekr, that's the last on our list. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in 2025. Please make sure to leave a comment with all the mistakes I made, with all your own observations of the Chinese brands in Malaysia. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And I'll see you next year, 2025. We're gonna be doing more of these things. Bye bye.